Hey everyone, and welcome back to the cast. So today is a pretty sweltering day in Brooklyn, New York, where I live. It's about 90 degrees, so I am hiding from the heat and I am hiding from the sun. And while I'm hiding, I'm trying to embrace Canadian Highlander. Particularly, I'm thinking about this 4-color pod deck, aka Creature Combo, aka the Pat Berdusco Special. So, my understanding of this deck, from playing it for about a week and a half now, is a few different sections. We have mana acceleration, we have 3 different packages of infinite combos, and we have support spells as creatures and non-creatures. The deck is actually very streamlined, considering it looks like it's all over the place from the seemingly huge pile of creatures and weird out-of-place artifacts. I'm going to link the tapped out list that I'm looking at while I'm podcasting, so that if you guys would like to do some active listening, you can see what I'm talking about as I go down the list, at least as I see it. Before I jump into anything, though, I would like to thank everybody at the Canadian Highlander There Can Only Be One group, because you guys seem to be a very welcoming community, and I'm always interested in new formats of Magic, as this is far and away my favorite game and healthiest community in terms of all of the hobbies that I've been involved with. So thank you guys for welcoming me into your format, and I'm excited to bring it to everyone here in New York City, because so far it's been really well received. So thank you, and without further ado, let me jump into this sort of deck tech here. So let me put on my Nick Miller voice and see if I could do the SCG. Hey everyone, blah blah blah, here in the booth with no. Okay, it's not gonna work. Okay, so mana acceleration. I think I have like 8 or 9 1-drop mana dorks. We have like Arbor Elf, Birds, Deathrite Shaman, Elvish Mystic, Land War Elves, etc., etc. You can see on the post that on my deck list, and that's important because of 1, the amount of 3 drops that we have in the deck, and 2, to get our combos online earlier than our opponent's disruption. And ideally, we have so many mana dorks because you want to open more than 1. That way you can basically, not time walk, but you'll get them down a few turns before your opponents are ready. And decks are typically built in mind to deal with things on curve, not necessarily before curve, so that is a consideration as well. The 3 different infinite packages that we have... Excuse me, I have really bad hiccups when I podcast. Only when I drink coffee when I podcast, so maybe I'll stop doing that. The 3 different infinite packages are everything to do with the Splinter Twin deck, the Painter Servant combination, and the Melira combination. So the first one, Kiki, it's Kiki and Splinter Twin versus Bounding Krasis, Deceiver Exarch, Pestermite, Restoration Angel, and Zealous Conscripts. Although some of these creatures are a little bit bulky and they are 5 drops and triple red, I'm looking at you, Legendary Goblin Shaman. They're easier to get out considering we have Birthing Pod and Cord and all of these spells to 2 different creatures to our hand and fix our mana as we go along. Additionally, we have the Painter Servant combo. And Painter Servant, if you're unfamiliar, makes all cards in decks 1 color, even the lands. And that works well for comboing with Grindstone, which is basically the same trigger as Sphinx's Tutelage, which will mill our opponent out because we'll only hit spells of a certain color. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that I always call green because I can use Green Sun Zenith and Woodland Bellower, that's his name, Woodland Bellower's effects to get any creature in the deck as long as they fit the other restraints like equals X or it's 3 or lower and non-legendary. Because Painter Servant makes all of my cards green, even when they're not literally green cardboard. So Painter Servant, outside of adding utility to our tutors and comboing with Grindstone, is also fetchable with Tezzeret the Seeker, which you'll find over in the Planeswalker section. And in addition to being fetchable with Tezzeret, so is Birthing Pod and the rest of our support/combo artifacts. So I felt as though this was not a shoehorned combo, it was just a natural inclusion, considering I was already playing cards like Sensei's Divining Top and Trinket Mage. And I was beforehand playing like 2 or 3 artifact lands as additional targets for Trinket Mage, but those came out for regular lands, and slots were allocated to Grindstone and Skull Clamp once I realized that Trinket Mage will be doing double duty, and I will likely be cloning him and blinking him with Restoration Angel to set up certain combos that are more resilient than Restoration Angel Kiki Jiki, for example. So I think that this combo does quite well in this strategy. Oh, and also Painter Servant is a 1/3, so it blocks early aggression. I really don't mind that. Lastly, the Malira combo. This is the same combination that got Pod banned by Team Channel Fireball in Modern, particularly Luis Scott Vargas, which is Malira plus Persist Things plus a Sacrifice Outlet. However, I am doing one thing differently from the old, the Modern deck, which is not using Viserys or Orzhov Pontiff or like Carrion Feeder or Falconwrath the Aristocrat, because those are black spells, and while black would shit out our mana base pretty hard, it would also just decrease the consistency of synergy between all of our combo and support spells. And what I mean by that is the type of interaction that I've already discussed with Painter Servant. A lot of our combo pieces are actually synergistic with just regular old spells in our deck. And what I mean by that is like, take Birthing Pod. Birthing Pod is capable of getting any creature out of our deck, so long as you have the right fodder. But it can also get creatures that untap Birthing Pod, which I wouldn't necessarily call a combo, but we are using combo pieces to do that. And those are like Zealous Conscripts, and all of the 3-drop Splinter Twin targets do that, which is great considering we can just more quickly get to 4-drops or 6-drops, which are more important to the board state and more pertinent to answering questions that our opponent provides than trying to linearly combo out. And so when people say that this sort of pod strategy is a fair combo deck, I do agree with them. However, I think it's a very powerful mid-range fair Magic deck as well, which makes for a strange red-headed stepchild sort of deck that I think it's a respectable combo deck, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's a very powerful deck because it can play many different game plans. And some people would argue that a Jack of all is a master of none, but I think that because of the amount of tutors and consistency, those peoples can go shove it up their own ass because this deck can master whatever the hell it wants with the amount of tutors that it has. So, if you're looking at this list right now, you'll also see that I, on the right hand, on top of having a bunch of tutors, have a couple of new spells to include on top of the lists that you may have seen in the past, and those spells are Skull Clamp and Cryptolith Rite. So Skull Clamp makes a lot of sense because we have Birthing Pod, and we have Ashnod's Altar, and Ashnod's Altar is the concession to black creatures. I don't want to do any of that mana-based deterioration with the black sack guys, so instead I'm playing Ashnod's Altar, but it's also a solid choice because I can fetch it with Tezzeret the Seeker, so I don't mind it at all. And it also adds mana instead of doing some irrelevant effect that I don't care about because I just want the sack. Adding mana is very valuable. It can help me ramp into Sun Titan and Woodland Bellower and even Kiki Jiki early, so that's something to consider. But right, the original point was talking about Skull Clamp. It works well with Ashnod's Altar and Birthing Pod and regular old fair magic, killing dudes, attacking, and casting spells. Cryptolith Rite is my own spin, my own innovation, whatever you want to call it, on the deck, being that I noticed how important it was that for us to have ramp in our hand because we want to be at least a little bit unfair and do things quickly. Cryptolith Rite allows us to explode turn after turn and will force the issue of Wrath of Gods on things that really shouldn't be Wrath because they're doing double duty. And I think that the reason that this deck is such a strong choice for a player that wants to have a versatile strategy is that it's exactly what was already discussed, which so many of these cards are doing double duty as combo pieces, support spells. Sometimes they're combo pieces with cards that they don't support, like they only combo, but when they're not comboing with other cards, they're supporting them, which is kind of a weird way to phrase it, but I think that once you see the deck in action, you'll realize that, like, okay, you can just use, like, Pestermite for value, or, okay, you can just use Sun Titan to get back lands to, or, like, Revlark to loop Eternal Witness, and not necessarily, like, infinitely loop it, but that's really hard to break unless your opponent has, like, some exile effect from Grave or whatever have you. So, yeah, the Cryptolith Rite will continuously let you explode and allows you to do things a few turns faster than I think the deck is used to doing them. I think that's roughly the rundown on all of the support spells. I mean, all of the tutors are very self-indicative, like Eldamri's Call, Chord, Worldly Tutor, Eldritch Evolution, although it's a new a new addition to the deck, it's very obvious why it's powerful. And Time Walk is the last piece of power on top of the two tutors survival and pod that I haven't talked about, but Time Walk makes sense because this deck uses pod and like tutors and requires a little bit of time for setup, so the card called Time Walk will actually give you time to do that. Additionally, this deck has a lot of access to Eternal Witness by getting it out of the deck or out of the grave with like Revlark, Sun Titan, and effects like such, or like duplicating it from grave with what the hell is it called? Body Double. So you can cast Time Walk way more than once or twice in a game of Magic, and if you are that player, then I think you're in the driver's seat. Some of the notable support spells that maybe look a little bit off. Spellskite, we're not like hating out any particular deck outside of maybe like a Boggle strategy, more so than we are just protecting our creatures from removal. The Cascade guys like Shardless Agent and what the hell is it called? Bloodbraid Elf. Those are great because they provide value, and they provide blockers for our Planeswalkers, and they also provide bodies on the ground for Chord of Calling and Birthing Pod. The only problem with them is that there are 2 X spells in the deck in terms of Green Sun Zenith and Chord of Calling, and those can be really underwhelming when you hit them with Bloodbraid Elf, and you can hit Green Sun Zenith with Shardless Agent, but I think that's just something that happens, and you have to... You know, like, every deck has a nut draw, but some decks have a butt draw, and that is a butt cascade, and it's unfortunate, but it does happen. My last point, I think, to talk about in terms of cards, I guess 2 things. One quick one, Jace Vryn's Prodigy. I would not play Merfolk Looter, but I'm definitely playing Jace because it's easy to flip in this deck with the amount of fetch lands and using, what the hell is it called? Survival of the Fittest is like really easy to get this card to flip, and we also have a bunch of tutors that are cheap. But it also flashbacks like the tutors, and that's really important. And I like having extra win cons in decks, in combo decks, because your opponent is likely to spend time and money or time and mana to disassemble your combo, and then once you have backup plans, they're going to have to rev up their engines to fight that plan now on top of your combo plans. And the backup plan on Jace is just to mill the opponent out, which is tough in a 100 card format, but is not tough considering the raw power of Jace Vryn's Prodigy. So, and the very last package I think worth mentioning is my last addition to the deck. It's Sun Titan / Safi Eriksdottir / Karmic Guide, and those were added to the deck because Revlark is such an outstanding player. Now, I don't think after testing them, I've tested probably 5 to 7 games with these cards in the decks across Dark Jeskai and Red Deck Wins and Jeskai... and Green Black Rock, particularly Alishar's list. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong. I don't have it in front of me, and it's not a name I hear every day. But yeah, these cards I'm a little bit skeptical about, particular Safi and Karmic Guide, because they are a little bit tough on the mana. White is more of a splash spell, or at least it was when I originally picked the deck up. And so I included Temple Garden and Sun Petal Grove to try to add some extra white into the mix. And perhaps I will even put an Avacyn's Pilgrim in the deck, but I'm not really sold on Safi at least, and it feels a little silly to not play her if I do want to play Karmic Guide and Sun Titan, particularly considering how many clone and ETB effects I have. So, I think that's actually everything I wanted to say about the deck, and I did not want this video to be as long as it is, or this recording to be as long as it is, but I really appreciate if you guys did get this far. And I hope it was interesting, because for me, this is so enjoyable to do. You know, I love everything about Magic. To me, it's the perfect game, even with its flaws. The flaws make it great, too. So, again, thank you guys so much for listening to this. It means a lot, because I'm trying to improve my commentary and analysis. I'm really invested in communications, and it's actually the professional career that I'm trying to build in broadcast as well. So any sort of criticisms, or please don't hesitate to comment and let me know what I could do better or what I did wrong or anything. You know, I have a thick skin, so please don't worry. And again, you know, thank you guys. You guys seem to be a really sweet community, and I'm looking forward to learning more about Canadian Highlander as a format and getting better at playing the format. So hopefully you guys stay out of the heat. Hopefully you stay real cool when you play Canadian Highlander, and I'll hear back from you guys soon. All right, take care.